The sun was already high above Rome, yet the city was still restless, vibrating with anticipation as tens of thousands of people poured through stone streets that had been carved not just for movement but for control. They weren't rushing to a battlefield. They weren't fleeing a disaster. They were heading toward entertainment. Ahead of them stood a structure so massive, so overwhelming, that it seemed less like a building and more like a warning. Stone upon stone, arch upon arch, a perfect circle of power, the Colosseum. But before you imagine gladiators and roaring crowds, before you picture blood soaking into sand, pause for a moment, because what this place truly represents is far more disturbing than violence alone. This was not simply an arena, it was a machine, a carefully engineered system designed to shape human emotion, to transform fear into pleasure, and to turn death into spectacle. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. Why did people love this place? Not just the emperors, not just the elites, but ordinary citizens, families, children. They came willingly, they cheered eagerly, they demanded more, because the Colosseum was never about gladiators, it was about us. Rome understood something that modern societies still struggle to admit. People are easier to rule when they are entertained, when their emotions are distracted, and when their darkest instincts are given a stage. Inside these walls, violence was not chaos. It was organized, scheduled, marketed. Death had a timetable. Every scream from the crowd reinforced a simple truth. When responsibility is shared by thousands, no one feels guilty. Here, morality dissolved into noise. A man could die and the crowd would feel powerful, not ashamed. And that power, that intoxicating sense of control over another human life, was the real spectacle. This is why the Colosseum mattered. It wasn't built to defend Rome. It wasn't built to honor the gods. It was built to train the public mind, to teach obedience through pleasure, to turn cruelty into normality, to make empire feel eternal. And as the emperor entered the arena, as the crowd rose to its feet in perfect unison, Rome wasn't just watching a fight. Rome was watching itself. Because the Colosseum asked a question that still haunts us today. How thin is the line between civilization and savagery? And more importantly, are we really that different now? Stay with me, because once you understand why Rome needed the Colosseum, you may start to see modern society very differently. The Colosseum was not built in a moment of peace, nor was it born from artistic ambition or religious devotion. It rose from the ashes of chaos. Before its stones were laid, Rome had burned. Civil war had torn the empire apart. Trust in leadership had collapsed, and the people, tired, angry, and suspicious, were no longer easily controlled. This was the Rome that Emperor Vespasian inherited. He understood something crucial. An empire cannot survive on fear alone. Fear breeds rebellion, but spectacle creates loyalty. And so, where Nero once built his private palace of gold, Vespasian chose to build something radically different. Not a home for emperors, a home for the crowd. The Colosseum was an apology disguised as generosity, a political statement carved into limestone, a declaration that power now belonged to Rome, not to a single mad ruler. Yet this generosity came with invisible chains, because free entertainment is never truly free. Every arch, every corridor, every tiered seat inside the Colosseum was designed with intention, not to inspire thought, but to guide emotion. The building itself became a silent instructor, teaching the population where to sit, when to cheer, and when to submit. From the outside, the Colosseum projected permanence. Its massive stone arches whispered a single message to every citizen who approached: Rome will outlive you. This was not subtle. This was psychological domination. Rome wanted its people to feel small, temporary, replaceable, while the empire felt eternal. Inside, the hierarchy was unmistakable. Seating was not random, it was social order made visible. The elite sat closest to the action, protected by marble and privilege. Women, foreigners, and the poor were pushed higher, farther from power, farther from influence. Even in entertainment, Rome reminded you of your place, and at the very center of it all, the emperor. When he entered the arena, every eye turned, every voice rose. This moment mattered more than laws or speeches, because here power was not debated, it was performed. The emperor didn't need to speak. His presence alone communicated absolute authority. Life and death rested in a single gesture, a nod, a raised thumb, a silent command. The Colosseum transformed rulers into gods and citizens into witnesses. But the true genius of this structure was not what happened in the arena. It was what happened in the minds of those watching. By offering spectacle, Rome redirected anger. By organizing violence, Rome normalized cruelty. By turning death into ritual, Rome erased empathy. This was control through pleasure. The people believed they were being entertained. In reality, they were being trained to obey, trained to accept brutality as normal, trained to associate authority with excitement, and perhaps most dangerously, trained to confuse participation with power, because shouting from the stands feels like control, even when real power remains untouched. The Colosseum did not need soldiers to enforce obedience. It did not need walls to contain dissent. It needed only distraction. As long as the games continued, as long as blood flowed on schedule, as long as the crowd roared together, Rome was safe. This is why the Colosseum stands as one of the most honest monuments in history, not because it hides cruelty, but because it reveals how easily societies trade freedom for spectacle. Stone by stone, Rome built not just an arena, but a system that reminds us, even today, that the most powerful empires are not those that rule by force alone, but those that understand the architecture of the human mind. The moment the gates opened, the arena stopped being a place. It became a test, not for the men who stepped onto the sand, but for the thousands who watched them do it. Because in the Colosseum, the true experiment was never the gladiator's strength or skill. It was the audience's reaction. The fighters entered knowing something the crowd did not. They were already condemned. Most gladiators were slaves, prisoners, or men with no legal identity. Individuals whose lives had been reduced to property, whose deaths could be scheduled like events on a calendar. And yet, when they stood in the center of the arena, covered in sweat and fear, they were expected to perform courage. The crowd demanded bravery, but offered no mercy. This contradiction defined the Roman arena. From the safety of stone seats, people screamed for blood with astonishing confidence. Distance removed responsibility. Numbers erased guilt. A single voice might hesitate, but 10,000 voices merge into certainty. Here, cruelty felt justified. The sand beneath the fighters' feet absorbed more than blood. It absorbed conscience. Every shout from the stands pushed the gladiators further, forcing them to fight not just for survival, but for approval. And approval in the Colosseum was more valuable than life itself, because a crowd's favor could mean survival. A moment of silence could mean death. This is where the arena revealed something unsettling. Human empathy is fragile. When violence is framed as entertainment and suffering is ritualized, compassion becomes optional. The Romans did not invent this instinct, they exposed it. They understood that when people are made spectators, they stop seeing individuals. They see roles, symbols, winners, and losers. The gladiator was no longer a man. He was a character in a story that required an ending, and the crowd believed they were passive. They weren't. Their noise shaped outcomes. Their excitement determined mercy. Their boredom demanded escalation. In this way, the arena turned the public into participants without ever forcing them to act. This was the genius and the danger of the Colosseum. Responsibility dissolved into applause. Philosopher Seneca observed this firsthand and left the arena disturbed, writing that people left not improved, but hardened, more cruel than when they arrived, because repeated exposure to violence does not satisfy our darker instincts. It trains them. Over time, the crowd demanded more spectacle, more blood, more extremity. What once shocked them eventually bored them. And boredom is the most dangerous emotion of all. To cure it, limits must be broken. This is how the arena escalated, from simple combat to executions to animal hunts to mass slaughter disguised as celebration. The Colosseum was no longer testing gladiators, it was testing humanity, and the results were clear. Given safety, anonymity, and permission, ordinary people can learn to cheer for suffering without ever seeing themselves as cruel. The arena did not create monsters. It revealed how easily we become them. Death did not enter the Colosseum as entertainment. It entered as necessity. In early Rome, violence was not spectacle. It was survival. Wars were constant. Life was fragile. Death was everywhere. People did not fear it because they saw it daily. But as Rome expanded, as borders stabilized, as citizens became safer within stone walls and disciplined legions, death slowly disappeared from everyday life. And when something disappears, it becomes fascinating. The Colosseum did not invent death. It reintroduced it in a controlled, ritualized, and consumable form. This is the first key to understanding why death became entertainment. Rome removed danger while preserving the sensation. The audience was safe. The victims were not. That distance changed everything. When death is no longer personal, when it no longer threatens you, it transforms from tragedy into experience. The Romans did not see dying men. They saw performances with consequences, and Rome understood something timeless. Humans are drawn to the edge of existence. To watch someone stand where we fear to stand is both terrifying and irresistible. The arena turned mortality into theater, but fear alone does not explain applause. There was something else at work, something deeper: control. In a world ruled by emperors, laws, and fate, the average Roman had very little power. Life decisions were made above them. Wars were declared without consent. Taxes were unavoidable. Justice was inconsistent. But inside the Colosseum, for a few hours, the crowd felt powerful. Their voices mattered. Their reactions shaped outcomes. Their boredom demanded escalation. Here, death obeyed them. This illusion of control was intoxicating. The crowd was not merely watching death, they were directing it. And when people feel powerful, they feel alive, even if that power rests on suffering. Over time, this sensation replaced empathy, because empathy requires closeness, and the Colosseum thrived on distance. Gladiators wore helmets that hid their faces. Victims were given identities: Thracian, Gaul, criminal, not names. Names create connection. Labels create permission. By stripping individuals of identity, Rome made cruelty acceptable. This was not accidental, it was design. The arena taught Romans how to stop seeing people and start seeing symbols. A defeated gladiator was not a man begging for life. He was a narrative reaching its climax, and every story, Rome believed, needed an ending worthy of applause. Philosopher Seneca recognized this danger immediately. He wrote that exposure to the games did not release aggression, it sharpened it. People did not leave calmer, they left hungry, because violence, when consumed as entertainment, does not satisfy the instinct. It educates it. What once shocked the audience eventually bored them, and boredom is fatal to spectacle. To maintain excitement, death had to become more creative, more brutal, more public, more frequent. Executions were no longer enough. Animals were introduced. Public humiliations followed. Mass deaths were staged as festivals. Rome did not celebrate death because it loved cruelty. It celebrated death because cruelty worked. It unified crowds. It distracted anger. It redirected frustration away from power and toward victims who could not resist. The Colosseum became a release valve. Every scream in the arena was a scream not directed at the empire. This is why death became entertainment, because it stabilized power. But the most disturbing truth lies deeper still. The crowd believed they were watching others. In reality, they were rehearsing themselves, rehearsing how to obey authority, how to suppress compassion, how to normalize suffering. The Colosseum trained people to accept violence when it was presented as tradition, as culture, as fun. And this training did not disappear with Rome. The arena fell. The sand was washed clean. But the instinct survived. Because whenever suffering is packaged, whenever humiliation is broadcast, whenever death becomes content, the Colosseum returns, not as stone, but as behavior. When the games finally ended, when the gates closed and the sand was no longer stained with blood, many believed the Colosseum had failed. That civilization had outgrown brutality, that humanity had chosen compassion. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. The Colosseum did not disappear because people changed. It disappeared because the form changed. Stone crumbled, crowds scattered, but the instinct remained. Because the Colosseum was never just a building, it was a lesson about how easily humans accept cruelty when it is framed as tradition, how quickly suffering becomes normal when it is repeated often enough, and how power survives best when violence is turned into entertainment. Rome did not fall because it was cruel. It fell because it forgot how to question itself. And every society that stops questioning builds its own arena, sometimes with stone, sometimes with screens. The danger is not that we enjoy spectacle. The danger is forgetting who pays the price for it. So when you look at the Colosseum today, standing silent beneath the Roman sky, do not see ruins, see a mirror. Because the arena only truly dies when we refuse to cheer. The Colosseum fell, but the choice it forced upon humanity is still being made.